Hi, this is Jeff Davis, the Jeff Davis Marketing Show, and today's subject is how to be good service. Well, this is a story of how I was able to help a friend in need. Now, most of you know that I help people out online, but recently I was in a position to help a good friend of mine. We'll call him Mr. T. Now, Mr. T is a stage 4 cancer survivor. They removed a tumor from his head, roughly the size of a softball. The good news is, after chemotherapy, he is cancer-free, and now he's a cancer survivor. The bad news is that he needed more surgery to repair some of the damage in his face when they removed that tumor. When they removed the tumor, they also removed his upper palate. As a result, he can't breathe or swallow without a special denture plate because his tongue rolls up in the back of his throat and chokes him. It's not any good. Okay, I have to reset the story. So I take Mr. T to the hospital. We blow a tire on the way, but we get there. So we get him to the hospital, and they prep him, and we say goodbye, and I drive home. My understanding is that he'll be there overnight. A few hours later, the doctor calls me up and says that I should pick Mr. T up at 2 p.m. and he's ready to go. I'm kind of like, okay. So I drive back to Omaha. I go in, and he's still not out of anesthesia. He's still not conscious. So they wheel him out, and much to my horror, they didn't clean him up after the surgery. There is blood everywhere, and the sutures are weeping blood, and the blood is pooling in his eyes. Plus, I forgot, they pulled all his teeth in the lower jaw. So here's my poor friend. He's got 45 stitches in his face. There's blood everywhere, all over his tongue, and up into the cavity where his denture plate goes. And frankly, I was freaking out. Even the nurses were scared. The stupid nurses were about worthless. They didn't clean him up worth a damn. And he's still bleeding badly. So I stole some gauze and some washcloths, and I tried to stop the bleeding and washed him up the best I could. And I held his hand and told him it was going to be all right. So it was obvious that Mr. T was in no condition to be shoved into a small car and travel 35 miles back to Fremont. So they admitted him. He was going to stay overnight, and I went home. The next day, I go in back to Omaha and go back to the hospital. Things are not good. By this time, Mr. T is mad as hell because no one will listen to him. And they keep trying to get him to swallow water without his denture plate in, thereby effectively drowning him. He's fighting back. So then the stupid doctor prescribes the wrong medicine, and we get in a big fight at the pharmacy because Medicaid denies the prescription. The lady at the pharmacy starts yelling at Mr. T, and he's just out of the hospital, still bleeding. And I come to his defense. I tell the lady to shove it up her butt. An hour later, we finally get the antibiotics and the ointment for his stitches, and I get him home and laid down and calmed down. So that was a big relief. So I stayed and watched him until about 9 o'clock, and then his brother came to sit with him until midnight, and I went home and collapsed. I was through dealing. It was an emotional roller coaster. So, number one, I didn't understand the scope of the operation. They kind of undersold it. I was horrified at what they did to him. It looked like he came through a car windshield. I was so scared for him, because he was in so much pain. And so I stepped out of the room, I gathered myself, and I decided I was going to do whatever I could to ease the situation. So I took action, and I started stealing supplies. So I'm grateful that I was in a position to lend a hand to my brother and hold his hand when he came to and lend my strength to him so he could get through this terrible operation. Also grateful that I was able to help Mr. T when he really needed a friend and a brother in arms. So the good news is, today I went over and checked up on him, and he's doing relatively well. The sutures have stopped bleeding. It's not pulling in his eyes anymore. He removed the gauze from his nose, and he can breathe normally through his nose now. That's a huge step forward. He's eating. I checked on him to make sure he's taking his medicines. So I have to say I'm encouraged by his progress. His stress levels are down, and he's resting peacefully. So I want to thank everyone who supported me in this trying time. My wife, Kathy, especially, who's an angel. I want to thank his brothers who came over and visited him. And I came and sat with him. I couldn't have did it without these people. So that is the story of how I was able to help. This has been Jeff Davis, the Jeff Davis Marketing Show. I'll talk to you real soon.